Okay, okay, we are back. We are back. Hopefully you are too. Oh yeah, so I hear my phone going off. There is a little definitely a delay, but let me turn that back down because we're back to business. So I don't need that on. All right, so here we go with the COVID vaccine. Are you ready, ladies and gentlemen? My question is, are you ready for a mandatory COVID vaccine? There has been quite a bit of talk about it, but not as of late, right? But let me ask you, and I'll tell you why I thought about it now, because the report that I'm actually going to read, the first one anyway, was actually written on June 3rd, and I got it from well, I'll tell you where I got it from later. But the point of it is, they were talking at that time on June 3rd about the fact that there was a possibility of a mandatory COVID vaccine that would come into play, and it made me think about um well, something else that made me think about this. What made me think about this is what recently happened at Notre Dame. I'm not sure how much you all know about that, but at Notre Dame, just a couple days ago, or a few days ago, they had a game, some football game, and there was so much going on in the football game that they decided that they would probably make it necessary and mandatory that all the boys that were involved in the game had a mandatory COVID clearance or testing, COVID test for clearance, bro, a clearance test, not a vaccine, but a clearance test. But because of the fact that it was mandatory, and we'll get into that later, it made me think about what I read on June 3rd, and the fact that if they would make this COVID clearance mandatory, there's a possibility that coming down the track, they're going to try and make the vaccine mandatory. Now, I'm sure many of you have been in conversations about that. I know I have. But I'm wondering what your thoughts on that is. What are your thoughts on the possibility of a mandatory COVID vaccine? Not a clearance. We'll talk about that later. But what are your thoughts on a mandatory COVID vaccine? And just let me know in the chat. While you're getting ready or thinking about that, I'm going to go ahead and read a piece from Vogel Law Firm. I found this online. So it says, and I won't read it all, but I'm gonna read a bit of it. Many employers are beginning to call back employees who were temporarily allowed to telecommunicate, furloughed, or laid off in response to the COVID-19 crisis. As a measure to protect the workforce, some employers may be considering mandatory COVID testing of employees as a condition of their return. Can employers require mandatory testing or mandatory vaccines if one is developed later? What should employers do upon employee refusal? So I guess that's my question before we got off any other. What is your thought about that? What do you feel about the possibility of a mandatory COVID test? That's what I want to. That's what I want to know. Not test. I'm sorry. COVID vaccine. What do you feel about it? What would you do if your employer told you that you had to have a COVID vaccine in order to continue your job? And that's for anybody to answer. Any of you, what are your feelings? I know I had one of my girlfriends came in my office today at the store, and she said we were talking about the fact that she wants to go to Africa, but she doesn't want to be, she doesn't want any vaccines at all. That's actually what made me think more about this. I've been thinking about it for the last few days, but when she came in there talking about that, I said that's a really good topic or subject. She doesn't want any vaccine. She wants to go to Africa, but she don't want no vaccines at all. And I said to her, well, you're gonna have to have a COVID clearance, definitely, right? She didn't want the clearance either. She said, I don't want the clearance either. I don't want. I said, well, I don't know how far you can. I don't know if you can. If you can go without it. And we started digging around, looking around for stuff. So that's kind of what really sparked the conversation. It made me really want to talk about it. So what do you feel about it? What do you feel about it? What are your initial thoughts about it? That's the part one. So let's stay there first. What are your initial thoughts about a mandatory COVID vaccine? Tracy said, I don't want to do it, but I have to work. I don't want to do it, but I have to work, she said. That's a valid reason. I don't want to do it, but I have to work. Anybody else? That's a very valid reason. So, why don't you want to do it, Tracy? Let me ask you that. Because people don't want to do it for several reasons, but why don't you want to take a COVID vaccine? If if they're telling us that it is going to, well, maybe I should start here. Do you take any other vaccines? I mean, because I have, for instance, I've taken vaccines. I took them before I went to Africa in February, and and I have all the ones that they regularly tell you, with the exception of the flu shot. I've taken it a few times, but I didn't take it this year or last year. So why don't you want to take it, Tracy? And anyone else? Do me a favor, you all, please, and share the stream also while you're waiting and while you're thinking or just chilling. Do me a favor and share the stream. I have a goal of 1,000 subscribers before February 1st when I leave for Gambia, God willing. By the time I leave, I want to be able to video from my phone, from my YouTube account. So I need 1,000 subscribers, and I'm currently at, I think, 460. I think it is. So do me a favor. If you haven't subscribed, do that. If you haven't liked the channel or liked the video, please do that. And then also share the stream with another 2 or 3 people, if you will. Okay, so Tracy said, I don't want to do it, but I have to work because I don't trust Big Pharma. Good reason. And then she says, if companies are in a race to do anything, it's not safe. I was having that discussion with somebody absolutely today. I thought exactly about that, Tracy. If they are rushing, I had Famara laughing, but I'm serious though. I mean, maybe I was being a little facetious, but for the most part, I'm serious. I said to him, the way they rushing, we don't know what the after effects of that shit gonna be. What if it clear up your COVID-19 symptoms, but then you grow another ear next year? You got an ear growing out the side of your eye, a big old ear with wax and everything growing out the side of your eye. So yeah, maybe I'm being a little facetious, but the point is, there's no way they can know what the after effects of stuff of this something like this is when they're rushing the way they're rushing. There's no way they could know. I mean, right now, they come out with all these different medications and tell us, it's better. Yeah, this is going to be good for you, whatever ailment you might have. And a lot of times, it's no more than 2 or 3 months later, and we see the same thing, the same shit on TV. But this time, they're saying it took away your cough, but it causes cancer. So now they want to put you in a class action suit and help you get some money. Just crazy, just craziness. Because clearly they were more excited about getting your money from it than they were seeing it if it would really help you and if it did more damage than it should have. Right? It shouldn't do any damage, but when you playing God, I guess you can just assume some of that stuff is what I think. Right? Some of what you can just assume if you playing God anyway, and that's really what a lot of times they're doing. Yeah, right. If companies generate, so I agree with that. Anybody else on that topic? I agree with you 100%. So let me talk a little bit while anybody else is answering. You can do that, but let me talk a little bit about the letter. How many of you heard about the thing that happened at Notre Dame? After the ball game, like I said, they got really close. Of course, well, they were playing ball, and after doing so, they got a letter, and the letter reads like this. I hope I can read it because it's really small and really, I have to take out my glasses for this. Okay, so it says, and this is from the University of Notre Dame, Office of the President, and it's going to the students, of course. So it says, because you are now even more concerned about the potential for contagion in your home communities as you prepare to travel home at the end of the semester, the university will place listen to this now. They didn't notice until after the game was over that they were going to be receive this here letter right here. The university will place a registration hold on the record of any student who fails to appear for testing when asked to do so. A registration hold would mean that you are unable to matriculate or register for classes next semester or receive a transcript. This is a change from an earlier communication from Aaron Hoffman Harding and Mike Salmon, which stated that those who failed to appear would lose priority status for registration. Furthermore, you may not leave the South Bend area until you receive the results of your exit test. Again, should we discover that you have left the area, we will place a registration hold on your record. There will be a zero tolerance for any gatherings that do not comport with our health and safety guidelines on our campus. Those found responsible for hosting such gatherings will face severe sanctions, yada, 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 yada. I thought, oh, that is really interesting. That's serious, right? Because they're telling these kids that if you don't take this test, and I understand why they want to take this, don't get me wrong. I just think that we are riding a very slippery slope now, and I think that we should be aware of it. I'm not sure what all we can do about it, but I do think that we're on a very, very slippery slope in terms of citizens in this country. I don't know about what's going on in other countries. I'm talking about in this country, and I'm saying that for the same reason that Tracy made her comment earlier. We can't trust Big Pharma, right? We can't trust them. So if there's any way that we can avoid some of these things, I think that we should avoid them. Right? Because we're getting it's a very slippery slope when they start telling you what you have to do and that you don't have a choice. One of the ladies I talked to today said, and we were talking about this immunization stuff, she said to me, she said, I just feel like, I thought this was very profound, simple and profound. She said, I feel like if there's a risk that I ought to have a choice. I thought that's good right there. She said, if there's a risk, then I feel like I should have a choice. And that's how she feels when it comes to vaccinations and all that kind of stuff, right? Trace said, I got one better. Chase could not register for classes before the pandemic unless he got certain vaccines, plus his childhood ones. Before the pandemic. Unless he got certain vaccines, plus his childhood ones. Yeah, this is interesting. He had to get 3 in addition to what was on his records. That was mandatory, Tracy. I mean, I guess that's what you're saying, huh? It was mandatory. He could not register for classes, she said. Wow. And he's at a university or a college, one university or college, right? That's interesting. See, so this is very interesting. We really have to I think be aware. You had a deadline. Yeah, I think we really have to be aware. This is very, very University of Cincinnati. You know, we talk about, yeah. And so let me go back to what my girlfriend said about there being a risk. She feels like if there's a risk, then there should be a choice. And we know that there's a risk. And I think that's true. You should be given a choice. But that absolutely is not, we don't seem to be heading that way at all, right? So there was another piece on that I wanted to share with you from this article that was written on June 3rd. And so this is what I'm thinking about for people like some of us who may not want to, right? So there's an option, of course, usually when it has to do with religion. And then there's another option that they sometimes listen to. And I just kind of wanted to touch on them a little bit. This one says, other employees may resist testing for personal reasons. Under these circumstances, employers may remind employees that all medical information obtained will remain confidential. If the employee continues to refuse in the violation of a mandatory testing policy, now this is them talking about the possibility of testing and vaccine, right, in the workplace. Mandatory. If the employee continues to refuse in the violation of a mandatory testing policy, the employer can discipline the employee and or exclude him from the workplace until he agrees to be tested. That's what happened in the school, right, Trace? Employers should document any refusal to cooperate. Documenting refusal and the employee's workplace departure is particularly important in the event of a subsequent occupational safety and health administration related investigation. Tracy said, on a side note, Vic, boys will get no financial aid unless they register for the selective services. The government has way too. Whoa, I didn't know that. Is that new, Tracy, or is that something that has always been and I just wasn't aware of it? That the boy had to have. Wow, wow. That he had to register for selective service financial aid. Because now, after I read it out loud, it seemed like it might have been familiar to me. Was that the case, like when we were there, or is that something new? It's not new, okay? I remember hearing something like that back in the day. I don't know how long, but I feel like it was when we were there that I remember hearing something like that. So yeah, more the same, huh? If they give you something, or at least if they give a boy something, wow. So you're trading your life for that financial aid. That's really what it comes down to. So this is what I'm thinking. Okay, let me just read this one more thing, and then I'm gonna give my final thought on this, unless somebody else wants to talk about this. In recent guidance, the EEOC indicates that its position related to the mandatory flu vaccine would likely apply to a potential COVID-19 vaccine. That is, employees may be entitled to an exemption from any mandatory vaccination requirement based on a disability or a religious belief that prevents them from taking the vaccine. That's what the one I remember, the religious one, the disability one I didn't remember. To avoid these issues, the EEOC. You can hear me now, right? Let me know you can hear me. Okay, perfect. Okay, so there are a couple things I think we should think about. So the one thing is, if you really don't want to take the vaccine, then we really should look into these options of religious belief. Because if it's a religious belief or a spiritual belief, then of course those are reasons that many people haven't taken vaccines. And in actuality, whatever your spiritual beliefs are, whatever your personal beliefs are about immunizations, it can be a religious belief. It's religious for you. Do you understand? It's spiritual for you. I don't, it doesn't have to be stamped by the Catholic Church, So that's, I think, something that we should think about going forward, because this day is coming. I do believe this day is going to come. So we should think about that. Of course, if you have any kind of disability, like you said, I'm thinking that would occur, refer to people like, for instance, you know how people say that they believe that vaccines can cause autism or can be bad for those who have autism, that kind of thing. If there are any kind of disabilities in your life, then that would be another reason that you might say, I don't want no kind of, immunization, of course. The other thing is something that Tracy mentioned, which is just a fact. But it's also another reason I think that Black people, our community, has to look at ways to be self-sustainable. We have to look at ways to sustain ourselves outside of our jobs. And I hope that you all hear me when I say this. When you hear my heart, and I'm not trying to belittle anyone, or I want you to think, she could left her job, now she won't think everybody ought to leave their job. I don't think that. I just think that, and it was a sacrifice. It's still a sacrifice. The fact that I left my job is a sacrifice. So I don't want anybody to think, what I want you to think is that since I left, that it's smooth sailing. No, it's been interesting, and it's been good, and at times it's been bad, but it's almost like for me, marriage, right? There are a lot of ups and downs in marriage. There are a lot of ins and outs. There's some reason that you get up and you say, "Ooh, I love this man," or this woman. I love this man, whatever it is for you. And there's some days that you wake up and you say, if I catch you slipping, nickel, if I catch you slipping, it's going to be on and popping. You have both days, and quite a few of both. But at the same time, clearly I've determined that I'd rather deal with those days that are not that great and stay with the man I'm with. Right? Right, Tracy, knuckle. Right. I mean, because I could also say, I'm done with all of this and then move on. But you have to weigh the options, right? And for me, the good outweighs the bad. So I deal with it, right? And it's the same way when you make a choice to leave your job. Some days for me, I think, if it could be a little more consistent. Then there are some days when ain't no way in the world I'd made this kind of money on working a job every day. So you just have to learn how to balance, what you get. But I am saying this, that this is another reason I think that Black people as a whole, we need to start thinking about ways to be self-sustained, sustain ourselves. And many times in our jobs, we develop these skills and abilities, right, that we may not have originally had. And all we have to do to make some money outside our jobs oftentimes is to market those skills as a consultant. So that's something, hopefully that helps somebody. To take those skills that you have learned on your job, you perfected on your job, and learn how to market yourself and package it in a way that you can consult with the same skills and stuff, so that can move you out little by little what you're doing. One day you'll be able to just jump off into it if you spend enough time over in it. So that's a thought, right? That's a thought, and hopefully that helps somebody. So that's where I am with that whole COVID-19 piece. If anybody want to add to that, please do. Any questions, any comments, make your comments or questions now. Otherwise, we will move on very soon. So, that's where I am with that whole COVID-19 piece. I do believe that vaccinations are coming up the road and it won't be long. And I do believe that they'll be mandatory and it won't be long. And if you're having any reservations about them, then I think that you should think about them now. Think about how to be self-sufficient on your for yourself, for one, and think about ways that you want to negate that you don't refuse them and in a lawful way. So that's that. Let me know what you think about that. And we're gonna get ready for what Amy wanted to talk about. I don't even see her on here. Amy, I hope you're still on here because we're about ready to talk about your girl. Her happy ass. Whoo, Lord. Tracy says she's getting an antibody test at the end of the month. I haven't have any testing yet, but I am, of course, have to take it for my trip. So I'm not really looking forward to it, but it is what it is. It is what it is. So, moving right along. If you all are drinking anything else, let me know. I did put something else in my... I put a little bit of Evian in there. A little bit. And a little bit of this right here. You know when you see this bag, right? A little bit of it. I'm still working. Y'all remember when I opened that? I opened that at when I was on my Airbnb getaway.